This is Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. The men you are about to hear have spent more than 50 years in prison. We bring you stories of hope and encouragement.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast brought to you by Lean On Me USA. I'm Laz Lopez, and with us today, my brother from the same mother, Raul Pastor Lopez. Our special guest today, John Eddings, who was sentenced over 904 years, but had to do only 38 years. Mr. John Eddings.
You worded everything so wrong. It was 904 years plus 3 life sentences, and I did 38 years, 7 months, and 13 days. But remember, I wasn't counting the days.
I could see that, 38 years. I
mean, it always caught my attention that you escaped from 4 prisons, didn't you?
Well, actually, 2 jails and 2 prisons, correct.
Now,
there's some other attempts they know about and some other attempts they don't know about.
And, you know, and we can giggle about it now and we can laugh about it and look back, but I mean, if we actually take this for what it's worth, I mean, 38 years is no joke. We have, you know, gentlemen that are listening right now throughout the, you know, United States that are probably on their 30th or 31st or 35th or 38th year. Or more. And that's why you're here. I want to hear a little bit about yourself. You know, how did this whole thing start? Where you from?
Well, I was raised in Columbus, Georgia. I don't tell people I'm a big Georgia Bulldog fan, but I really don't tell a lot of people. I was actually born in Canton, Illinois, but my mom and dad got separated when I was about a year old. Mom took me back home to Columbus with her family, so I grew up there. Now, if you want, I really don't know if it started from a genetic thing from my biological father or whoever, but as very young, I was stealing in school. Even when we go, I was raised in a church, so I would act like I had to use the restroom, and I'd walk up through the door, and I'd slip over to the choir room and go through the women's purses in there and take money and go back to Hawkins store, buy a soda, and come back in. So there was something in me from the beginning where I was stealing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how it actually began. I just know it began, and once it started, there was a flow.
Yeah, and obviously that escalated. What age was that?
Well, I don't know exactly when it started, but I know that I can remember in first grade. I can remember that because I remember what room it was. When sometimes, you know, in the old desk with the pencil and pen would go in that slot there. People leave their lunch money up there, and I was the kid that would swipe the lunch money. I can remember it's from first grade, so at least goes back that far.
I mean, people might say, oh, that's kind of cute, but the thing is, I've always said it, and you audience know, right. Sin takes you further than you want to go, right? Keeps you there longer than you want to stay and costs you more than you want to pay. So right. How about your parents?
Like I said, I know I've never met my biological father that I know of. I was named after him, John Warren Roberts Jr. But then when we came to Columbus, my mom met who I believe is my real dad, William Gerald Eddings. They married when I was about 3.5, 4 years old. And I can't remember if it was 62 or something like that. He actually adopted me and gave me his name, John Eddings. He passed away last year. And I can tell you this right now that I want to add this in here. He may not have been my biological father, but he taught me that love's thicker than blood. Mm. And so I was very blessed in that.
Okay. So go ahead.
I just wanted to interject there that a lot of times it's the father figure. Anyone could have a child, but not everyone is a father. And Mr. John Eddings was actually your father, even though he wasn't your biological father.
Actually, it's Gerald Eddings on that one, right. Gerald. But yes, he was. And the crazy thing is, I can remember one thing that my mother told me of these years that just stuck. And after everything my dad's ever told, I can remember one thing he told me. One time when I was in Florida State Prison, the person at the mail post office had made out a money order for $500 instead of $50. And I got it. I'm happy to have all this extra money. He says, John, you just have to remember it doesn't belong to you. And I can't remember any other lesson he told me, but I remember that one. And I can parlay that into so many other areas of my life. But it's something I remember from him. You just have to remember it doesn't belong to you.
Yeah. And so your upbringing was pretty good. I mean, you had your father and your mom.
I have a great family. Listen, my one grandmother taught Sunday school. 2 cousins taught Sunday school. Another cousin played the piano and organ in church. An aunt played before my time. I can't remember. Her husband was singing in the choir sometime. And another granddaddy was a deacon in the church. So it's not like I did not grow up in a Christian environment. I have a decent family. I was just the proverbial black sheep of the family that just kept doing the stupid stuff.
And how did the drug addiction play in your life? When did that start?
I think the first time was in 1969. somewhere around then, I smoked some marijuana, and I took an old diet pill called Prelude that was popular then. And once I did that, I said, okay, this is me. But I learned something that I did not have when I look back at years later, I realized I did not have the ability to stop. And for a time, I didn't want to stop. I was just happy doing that.
And your first time in trouble?
Well, as far as with the law and stuff, well, we lived in Columbus, Georgia till my dad got a job at Cape Canaveral in the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida in '66. And the first time after that was in 1967. I found that I used to run away from home a lot. And sometimes I really wasn't running away from home. I just stayed out so late to avoid the punishment. I would just stay out 2 or 3 days. And so I remember the first time it was the day before Easter in 1967. I was running away from home, and a police officer recognized I shouldn't have been there on my own, and I ended up in the juvenile home overnight. My family picked me up the next day, and then it was shortly after that I got arrested joyriding, stealing a motorcycle, and I went to the juvenile home. Now, I know it was right before my 13th birthday. In between that Easter and my 13th birthday, the juvenile home for most of the summer, then to the Road Havers Boys Ranch in Palatka. I messed up there. They sent me back to the juvenile home. And from there, I went to the reform school in Okeechobee, which at that time was called the Florida School for Boys at Okeechobee. That facility is still there, but under a different name, running different place. And I just want to add this. I've driven in town a couple of times, and I've actually driven on campus on the thing. I'm not like I'm supposed to be there just so I can look around and see it.
Yeah, we've passed by there because I've had the pleasure to volunteer with you.
That's right.
We volunteer together for prison fellowship.
Look over here, Laz. Look over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, you mentioned at 13, you go to the juvenile school for joyriding. That's an early age, 13. What other things happened before you got arrested later on in life and went to prison? Because we tend to see a pattern, how things begin at a small scale and they escalate. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to make it the short version. I did suffer from peer pressure. Now, I can tell you that when we moved to Florida, the place where the cool kids hung out was just right down the street of the bowling alley. So I would hang out there, and because I was a good thief, or thought I was anyway, back then it was drinking and smoking cigarettes. So I would go, the Winn-Dixie was over here, the food fair was over there, and I'd get the Winn-Dixie bag over here and go to food fair, have it bloated like I had some filled up with beer, and go out with it, and then get the food fair bag and go over here and do it. And so I could hang out with them because I brought them the beer, the wine, and the cigarettes and stuff. They didn't really want me. They wanted what I could bring. But then I would hang out longer, and that's a lot of times it counted for running away from home because if I'm going to go home and get in trouble, I might as well stay out 2 or 3 days. And I used to have it counted. I ran away from home something like 30-something times. So I was incorrigible. As when they did put me in the juvenile home, they didn't know what to do with me, so they tried it at the Boys Ranch. That didn't work. So the juvenile delinquent officer convinced my family that the best thing to do is send me to reform school. And there, I really did suffer from peer pressure. Here's the thing. I found myself fighting. I figured out one time I fought almost every day. I can't fight a lick, so I just learned right then. As soon as somebody started talking, I swung on them. That might be the only punch I got in. And that was my life through there. But now this was during the old days when they actually beat us with a whip. It was like the barber strap you see on the side of the barber chairs, about this wide, about that long with a handle on it. And I had that 5 times while I was there. And I don't know how to tell you how painful that is and how good it felt when it was over with. Back then, you go there 7 months and you go home. A couple of weeks before I was supposed to go home, I got in trouble. And from that point, I became what they call a cut timer. I did not know how to stop getting in trouble. I couldn't go home. And actually, we don't have time to talk. I actually felt like I got kicked out at the end of the year. It was 6 days short of a year. They basically just kicked me out.
Kick you out of where now?
Reform school. I was in and out of trouble as a juvenile, went back to reform school. In and out of trouble, went back to reform school. And each time I would run away from there. They didn't have the same fences they have around now. I knew the whole areas around it because I was through the woods, through the swamps. One time stole a boat, went down Lake Okeechobee. And then for punishment, the last time they transferred me to what is now a youth offender prison, I think, in Lancaster. But then it was a co-ed reform school. They sent me there. I ran away from there 5 times. So when I got out, I was actually a little over 8, I was about 18 and a half years old. And that was really just a little bit more than 2 months before I got arrested and came to prison.
Right after 18?
Yes, like I turned 18 actually on one of those runaways from the reform school. But when I got out that year, it was December, it was about 18 and a half.
And what was your charge? What was that for?
Well, when I got arrested, that time it was for armed robbery.
Specifically, what was that?
Well, I actually was robbing dope dealers. The crazy thing is we'd set up like, not the big dope deals I have now, but I said, like, you're going to buy a pound of weed or something like that, and we'd rob them when they got there. I'd usually take their car to get away, and the way to report their car to the police officers, theft, they would tell some other reason about how they got robbed. But I actually went to prison for robbing dope dealers.
And how long did you do for that?
Well, here's another part of the story. When I got into jail, the police officer started to scare me up on things, and that's when I found out you could get a life sentence for armed robbery. So what did I know how to do? I knew how to run away. So I started escape. First, I attempted to escape out of this jail. We took a hostage, God bless him, locked him in a cell, but we didn't get out. Then they transferred me to the county jail. I did escape. I was gone a few weeks.
Wait a minute, John. I'm sorry, but I'm going to back up on there. You tied somebody up. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the guard?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
Walk us through that. Because I tell you, a lot of times we see Hollywood movies, and we're talking about real life here, and how you never really should have been on the streets now, but it was a miracle of God that you're here. Tell us about that.
I would tell the story as long as we understand. I am not proud of what I did. There was a time in my life that was one of the things I was proud of, because it was something like my claim to fame, so to speak. I'm grateful for what God brought me to, but I have learned that was wrong. But what it did, it was a city jail, and the city police department was downstairs in Gainesville, Florida, and there was a hallway, a big cell over here, cell over here, and then like a TV room. And on this one Wednesday night, only one guard was working because one was sick. And we had planned it, and back then we actually had metal spoons and stuff, so we had taken one and broke one off and sharpened it. And each time, every 15 minutes, his last name was Mann, Officer Mann would come down and do his thing. He'd sign off at the end of the hall, a checkbook. So we would always just kind of talk with him, and they would actually have a little physical roughhousing, sometimes playing a joke when they got it. But when we did it, I'm standing with my arms out the bars like this, and when the right time came, I think his name was pushed him into me. We did. I put my arm around like that with a knife to his throat. We got the keys and took control of it that way. But as we were trying to get the window unlocked on the second floor to go out of it, it just so happened that the guard that was supposed to work at midnight came up 3 hours early, and he saw, oh, what the heck are y'all doing out here? And that's the short version how I got. We didn't make it.
You didn't make that one.
No, not that one.
And so finally, did you get sentenced for?
Actually, what happens? When I was in the jail in Gainesville, I escaped and attempted to escape so many times. They had these crazy articles, modern day Houdini, escapee escapes and escapes again, stuff like this. First, they offered me a life sentence to plead guilty. I told them no. Then they came with 25 years, and I almost said yes. Then when they came with 15, I agreed to it. Here's the crazy thing. They had this lawsuit going on in the state of Florida at the time with overcrowding, and a federal judge that says no more people are allowed to go to the reception center from jail until this population goes down. I was either sentenced on a Monday or Wednesday, I can't remember which, and 2 days later I was out of the county jail, and I was in, they gave me something to plead guilty to get me out of jail before I hurt somebody or somebody hurt me.
And this was all before 21?
Yeah, it was. I was arrested in February 23rd of 73. My birthday's May 11th, so let's tell you how the distance between. And I think what happens, I got sentenced on June 19th, and on June 21st, I was in prison.
And for what was your total
Well, it was
sentence?
for armed robbery. What they did, they just threw everything out the window with agreement. I plead guilty for armed robbery.
15 years.
Right.
You did.
And see, back then, during the old parole system, you could actually get out of prison with a 15-year sentence in about 3 years if you acted right.
That's right.
I didn't have that ability, but that's the way it was back then.
That's right.
So now you're in prison. Take us from there.
Okay, so I went in with the 15-year sentence, and then the next year or so, they took me down to Dade County to face other charges. They actually happened before the ones in Gainesville. I just got arrested in Gainesville first. And what they did, they gave me a 15-year sentence and a 5-year sentence, another plead guilty thing. They were running concurrent with each other and then running concurrent with the 15. So even though I had 20 more years, it was basically I still had just a 15-year sentence. Then if you want to take it from there, then over the next 5 years, for the first time in my life, I've been incorrigible my whole life as a kid, but then I found myself where the adults around me encouraged me to be incorrigible. I was in heaven. I mean, I was taught how to do everything I shouldn't do. I was encouraged every time I did it, the wrong thing right. I was even encouraged when I did the wrong thing wrong. So instead of making that 3 years or 3.5 years to get out, I could have gone to study release back. There's a lot of things I could have done, but all I did was pursue getting high. I was a hustler. I learned how to sell dope. I learned how to run football tickets and basketball tickets and things like that. And that's gambling operations for those of us that are not in prison, don't understand. But what happened was I ended up at the DeSoto Correctional Institution again, and I had been there once before in the early stages, and a man had escaped by climbing over the control room. And they, instead of having a guard tower and all of the, they had 2 fences go around and have what they call a paraguard system. And if anybody steps on the ground, it sends an impulse to a control room, and they know, and they have the road trucks outside will race to whatever area it was. But their weakness was over the actual control room where you walk in, they didn't have it there. So this guy had escaped while I was there by just climbing over the control room. So I've been in about 5.5 years. I'm back in DeSoto, and I'm asking this classification officer from helping something. He kept telling me no, and it was very unreasonable. I felt I wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. And finally he told me basically to shut up. And he said, furthermore, that 15 years you got, I'm going to make sure you do it day for day. And I always remember, I said, no, I'm not. I'm gone. And about 2 weeks later, I was over the control room, and I was gone.
How long did you last on the street?
Oh, about 5 days.
Where'd you go? What'd you do?
Oh, I went to Fort Myers, and I was first. It took me a day and a half to get there. No, actually, I got there the next day in the afternoon, and I shoplifted something to get some real clothes. I left out of prison clothes, and I robbed somebody. And I took a little bit of money and got a hotel room, ate, I partied, got drunk, and just slipped around and robbed somebody else and got caught. The short version, got caught on that one, and then they put me in the jail, and they knew who I was, and I stayed in the Lee County Jail in Fort Myers for the rest of the summers.
John, I remember one time thinking, I am so attracted to the adrenaline rush, of doing things that were wrong. And for a long time, I remember not feeling guilty, but there came a time where I looked at myself and I said, what am I doing? I hear your story, and I saw that you were on a path, like you said, incorrigible. But what was your mental state? How did you feel? Did you sometimes feel guilty? Did you feel like maybe I need to stop this? Where were you at emotionally and mentally?
Well, I can tell you that there did come a time many years later when I did reach that point. But at this point, I was not thinking about anybody else. I can tell you, let's go back to the peer pressure thing. I remember in elementary school, I was the kid that really didn't fit in with everybody as well as I would have liked to. Then when I got to Florida, the junior high was even stronger. Okay, but what did happen was when they sent me to the Old Rock, UCI in Rayford, where older men were taking me up under their wing, and now I felt like I was somebody. And I was doing the things that were wrong, and I had no bad feeling about it at all. None at all. What I felt good about was I was somebody again. I felt like I was somebody. So throughout this course, everything we talked about so far and other things, no, I did not feel remorse. I had not learned to that point. And I want to go backtrack. So I did grow up in a Christian family, and I remember when I went to the altar call, I remember when I was baptized, I believe that I was sincere back then in my immature decision. But from that immaturity to other things, there was a path in between, and I just went somewhere else. It was many years in my adulthood before I returned back to this. But I do believe that when I made that decision as a kid, I was sincere, but I just didn't know what I was doing.
And I heard negative mentoring. Actually, we all have a need to be accepted, to feel we're part of. And even though you were doing wrong, you had all these men who were patting you on the back and saying, there you go, kid. And you looked up to them, and they were probably armed robbers and so on. So I could see how that could just continue to escalate.
Well, the one thing that I found that I was pretty good at, some men had money from home. A lot of my parents, they would send a few dollars here and there, but I did not have the kind of money I needed to live the way I lived in there, getting high and gambling, stuff like this. And some men had family members that brought dope in for them. The smuggling goes on. And there's a lot of different things. But I learned that since I didn't have it, if I wanted to live that kind of life, what I needed to do was become a good hustler, the person that sold the dope and everything for these other guys. It's just like if you had a business out here, if you've got somebody you can depend on, if you have a lot of properties and one person manages all of them, you're going to hire that one person to manage all the properties. So I learned the best way to have a life was become the best dope seller for the people who had all the dope. And I was also my best customer, but that was another story. And that allowed me to have esteem, some kind of esteem for myself. I felt good about me because I was accomplishing something, and I was looked up to, even when some people didn't like me, still looked up to. I can remember twice in my life, almost 2 years apart, two different institutions, two different men said almost the same thing. John, I can't stand you, but one thing about you, you're a hustler. And I took pride in it. I was a hustler, and people recognized it. So that's what I cared about. I cared about me. I cared about what I was doing and what I thought people thought about me.
And when you first started this sentence, tell us, would you say you were a little manipulated by the older convicts, taught things? Because we have listeners right now that are first timers, they're young, and tell them how they can get manipulated into these positions, into these attitudes.
I'm having to think about this because in some ways I felt like I manipulated them. Because, yes, I was used in a lot of different ways, but I needed what I just described in my life. I needed to feel good about me. And I found this by turning to stuff like that. And plus, I stayed high. Here's when I do get a chance in prison ministry, and even before I left prison, when I talked to people first coming in, I basically told them the same thing. For one thing, you have to forget that life. You have to look towards the future. And what you have to do, you need to take every program that's available in there, and you need to take it like a Thanksgiving dinner, where you start at one end with the plate, and by the time you get done, and that plate is so full, you wonder, how the heck am I going to eat all this? And what happens is that you stay so busy that you don't have time to notice the time, and it passes. And it's passing in a positive way, and you actually will reach a point in your life that when it is time for you to go, say, wait a minute, but I haven't finished. I tell you that I had got to where I hated myself a lot of times. Later in years, I would look at myself in the mirror and hate what I'd done to get this, to do that. Like when you're a junkie, like when I was on escape last time, I remember robbing people's things I did, and I would go to the bathroom in the bar to shoot the dope, and I see myself in that mirror, and all I could see was, man, I hate you. And so I did reach a point later in my life when I'm looking, I don't like the man I am. But what you can do, you can make the same mistake I made and start early on building this man that you hate or this woman that you hate, or you can treat it like a Thanksgiving dinner. You can start filling that up, and you can start looking in that mirror, and you can find the person that you like. And here's something else I want to add. Yes, there are men and women who know they are never walking out of that prison alive. They have a sentence. It's life without. They do that. But I can tell you that with all the time that I had, even though I was parole eligible, I really felt like, even though I never gave up presenting myself to the parole commission, I realized I was probably dying in there. And what I can remember there was a point in my life, it was in 2005, that I had become something. I realized that I had become something I had never been before in my life, and I took pride in that. I had become a positive, contributing member of my society. Yes, my society was behind bars, but I had been able to, I could look in the mirror and say, okay, you can live with John. And that's what, if you think you're never getting out, live with the John in you, the Jane in you. You build it where you can live with yourself. Forget the people around you. You live with yourself. And again, Thanksgiving dinner, you fill up the things in your life. You get here, how else am I going to do it? But you do it, and what's going to happen is you're going to build a life for yourself that you can take pride of yourself in.
You made a point that I've met, and I'll even mention his name, Raymond Green, Billy, over in South Bay. They've been down over 22, 23 years, and they've become that productive member of their society.
Right.
Now, someone from the outside might have looked and said, oh, he's just a jailbird. He's incorrigible. He's the dregs of society. But you know that there came a point where you were actually impacting others, like these men that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And because we talk a lot about reintegrating into society, but there are men that will die in prison. And my hat goes off to you are lifers that are making a positive contribution at wherever institution that you're at. You speak to the young men. You could just change the whole atmosphere because, John, a lot of the younger guys are looking to the convicts.
Right.
I made a statement one time that there are convicts and there are inmates.
Right.
And those of us who've been down, we know what that means. And to see a convict actually walking in a positive manner, that makes a big difference. You might have been probably saved someone's life when they got out. You were talking, John, that you came to a point where you recognized what you were doing. You looked in the mirror and you hated yourself. But during the time, we mentioned earlier, you were sentenced to 904 years.
Plus 3 life sentences.
Plus 3 life sentences. So you could have died and resurrected 3 times, and you still would have been in prison. But tell us a little bit about that and what was going on inside of you that led you to the point where you had an encounter with our Lord Jesus.
Okay, I can tell you that, see, as I mentioned earlier, in that first five and a half years, I was skateboarding through prison. I was having a good time. But then when I escaped that last time, they offered me a deal, I think it was 50 years, to plead guilty. And I'm doing the math in my head. I had the escape charge. I'd always run consecutive. That's 15 years. That's 65 years plus the time I've already got. That's like a life sentence. So I said, I'm not going to plead guilty to it. So I went to this crazy trial. And I remember that I got found guilty, 5 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of robbery, 1 assault. And they gave me 9 90-year sentences plus a 5-year. That's 815 years. Now, granted, they were running concurrent with each other and concurrent things. So technically, I only had like 95 or 100 and something years in that kind of way. So I had like this convoluted mixture of all these sentences. But then what happens, when I went back to the Department of Corrections, I found myself in a different position. Before, I was skateboarding, knowing I'll get out of this sentence one way or another one day. But now I didn't have any choice but to escape. So then it became a different thing. So I'm still leading my life, hustling, doing everything else in there. But the whole time I'm looking for a hole in the fence. Crazy thing, I was shooting dope one day, missed a vein, hit the artery. They had to rush me to Shan Teaching Hospital. And while I was there, I was planning on escaping from there. And it was the easiest thing, just before it was as secure as it is now. The crazy thing is, the night before I was going to escape, my sister and her fiance came to visit me in the hospital. So I can't leave at night like I planned because I think they had something to do with it. So the next morning, I was going to go, and the next morning, they escorted me back to the prison. But before I left, I wanted to make all excuse I can. No, you can't go there. There's bad doctors, everything. I said, but I got to bring you twice to see you again. I said, okay. So first they sent me to Lake Butler. I campaigned back to UCI, and I knew what day I was going. Just before security got as good as it was. So I smuggled a knife blade with me to the hospital and actually kidnapped the doctor, took the guard's gun, handcuffed him, took the state van, and took the doctor hostage. Again, I won't say anything. I'm not proud of this. Then there's a time in my life I was. I'm just explaining to you what happened. So then I had to go out of a roadblock that night. The next night, I stole a city councilman's car, drove back to Gainesville, where I came from, and I intentionally waited till there was a woman coming up by herself. I kidnapped her. She turned out to be another doctor from the same hospital. Now there's people who believe these doctors helped me escape. They didn't. But the thing is, I did not hurt her. I didn't let her go the next morning. And then I took her car and went. And the short version of this, I was gone for almost a year and a half before they found me, but I ended up getting 3 life sentences and 45 years for that. I got 7 years for a robbery in California on the escape, and then 2 years for a weapons case in Florida when I first got back. And that's what total that came up with the 904 years and 3 life sentences. And some of the life sentences were running consecutive. Some of these no, I can't remember. I think one time I figured out if you threw all the concurrent sentences away, it's still like 300 and something years, a couple life sentences or something.
But John, I mean, right now my head is like, I mean, I'm sure the listeners are, hold up. I mean, what a mess. What a mess. And so you're a year out. You're a whole year out on the street.
But
you're a fugitive.
Right.
And you ended up in California.
Right.
And so all this time, I mean, looking over your shoulder, where's money coming from? But
it's just, I was a hustler. Things happen. But if I can, I want to get past that. Because what happened was then when I came back, it was another different life.
John, like my brother was saying, it was a deep mess. We're talking 904 years and 3 life sentences. But something happened. People use the word epiphany, an encounter. Some people just made a decision to give their hearts to the Lord. Or what was it that actually happened to you?
It was late 1982. So I came back to Florida State Prison then. And over the next 15 years or so, I was the same person I'd always been, but in some ways a little bit more of a mature area because I had got some maturity being free for. I had like a kind of feeling for what it's like to be out there. But I was still the hustler, still the gambler, still doing all this. But I just sort of beat myself down over years. But in the course of this thing, I got what they call interstate compact and actually returned to California, serving Florida time for 7 years.
Where were you at, John? Pelican Bay, Chino?
No, I
where?
was at New Folsom facility.
Folsom.
Right.
Okay.
And it's while I was there, when I got locked up on this trafficking case.
When you say locked up,
Well, like lockup, the
confinement.
Confinement, right.
Okay.
And those of us who've been in it just know we're talking about going to jail. We're in confinement. We're in prison. We still talk about going to jail. So I'd gone to jail for a trafficking case, and I got in a situation with this guy, and I just knew it was going. I just felt like it was going to be a deadly situation, and I that's when I returned to my roots. So I said, God, please get me out of this, and I'll never turn my back on you again. And he got me out of it in a very left-handed kind of way. I did not turn my back on him. I say left-handed because remember, I'm never getting out of prison. So as long as I deal with people with integrity, I'm all right because I'm governing by a different set of rules. So I would go to church a lot of time. I read my Bible every day for the next several years, except for 1 6-month period. I would go to church, but I would go out there and bring in money from the gambling operations, and I would tithe it and give it to people. So you didn't have a church offering in the church, but we find ways to do it. I was very left-handed. But there came a point around the 7-year mark of being out in California that, I was selling all the dope on the yard, had the gambling operations, and I'd reached real low, and I'm strung out on dope while I'm in there. I was the guy with the crank. I'm smoking crank every day. And God just saved me from me. And I got another trafficking case, and while I was there, I campaigned to return to Florida. Here's the short version, but I did come back to Florida. And over the next year, so I'm back in Florida State Prison. I still read my Bible, but I still have that very left-handed relationship. Because what difference? I'm never getting out of prison. I got a different set of rules as long as I deal with the men I live around with integrity. But then a friend of mine got into an argument. I can't tell you the date, July of 1998, Florida State Prison, the worst prison in the state of Florida. And that's back when they had population there, which they don't have now.
The Rock.
And no, that's not the Rock. It was the East Unit.
That was FSP. That's right.
And I just knew that the next day these two men were going to get into a sword fight. Somebody's going to get hurt. And I'm praying, God, nobody gets hurt, nobody goes to jail. And even though I didn't hear the voice, I felt like God said, what have you done for me lately? I remember saying, I'm not praying for me. I'm praying for somebody else. I just felt like I said, but what have you done for me? And I said, gosh, this is the cleanest hustle I've ever had. Instead of selling dope and everything, I got a little soda business. I'm selling sodas and stolen tea out the kitchen and stuff. And yeah, I may sell a few sacks of weed every once in a while so I can smoke some weed. I'll get high and go to church. I'm all right with that. I said, but I felt like this time God was saying, with silence on the wires, he says, I felt like God was telling me, he says, I've let you straddle this fence for too many years. You've heard the preachers, you've been to church, you've read the Bible. You can get on one side of this fence or you get on the other one. But if you get on the other one, I ain't got time for you. I felt like what he was telling me. So the hustler that I was, I said, okay, God, I'll make a deal with you. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody goes to jail. I will stop hustling. But if you want me to stop getting high, you have to take it from me because I do not know how to stop getting high. The next day, they settled this thing with nobody getting hurt, nobody going to jail. I had a going out of business cell, and I've not been high since. And that was the beginning of me getting my life back.
Wow. This is an interesting story. You don't get me going. Don't start something. There won't be none. Gentlemen, ladies, just tune in next week when we continue the story with John Eddings. John, it's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Don't miss it. This is the Prison Podcast, Death of Prison Podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. Also partnered with Alpha USA. We're below the screen. There's a phone number that you can call and connect with us so they can connect your family and you with a mentoring church near you and near them. This is the Death or Prison podcast, but we like to say, choose life.
Lean on Me USA, in partnership with Alpha USA, wants to connect you to a welcoming church. To begin a new life, call 314-607-8850.
I can change the world. Feed one, teach one boy and girl. Maybe we can change the world.